All right, what's up, y'all? So I have some great info to share with you today. I think it's great. We'll see how it comes out. But so I usually have a couple of client sessions most days, and I cherish these sessions. I love my job. I'm so thankful for what I get to do every day. And when you have these sessions where two people come together with the intention to help and heal, and it's a genuine intention, you can't help but have some like magic stuff come out of those things. And sometimes I feel like concepts are created in sessions. And as we're having these sessions, I'm like, man, I wish we could record that. Today was one of those days. Like I had a session a while ago, and I was like, man, I wish we could be recording this because this is such useful info. So I'm going to try to capture it right now. And I hope I can do it in a concise manner. And I hope it comes across the way that I want. But, I had this client earlier, and by the way, I've been with her about 6 weeks, and I'm super proud of her efforts, especially with her real food nutrition, because before working with me, she was a binge eater on junk food. She was a Coca-Cola addict, and since we've been working together for 6 weeks, she has not done either one of those things without even really trying. Now, she beats herself up for eating too much rice sometimes. She calls it binge eating on rice, but it's, from what I can tell, it's not necessarily. But anyway, she doesn't feel good about some of the excess she does here and there. But overall, she's experiencing some great changes from it. And so today, we're sitting and just reflecting on the past few weeks and looking over her food journal. And she said, well, what's really important to me is I just want to talk to you about how I feel like I self-sabotage myself. I feel like there's a part of myself that gets to this point where I'm experiencing success, and it doesn't want me to experience that success, and so it holds me back, and it helps, it contributes to me making some poor decisions. And so I listened to her, and we sat and talked that out for a little bit. And as I was listening to her, I didn't see or feel any hint of this alternate personality or this version of herself that didn't want this. In fact, all I could see is this beautiful person that does want these changes. And by the way, this reminds me of everybody that I work with and most of the people that I interact with. Everyone wants the best things for themselves. I don't see that, and I'm not saying that this isn't out there. I'm not saying that this isn't a part of it or a possibility, but especially with her, and I know with a lot of people that I work with, and may apply to you too, I don't see that you don't want those things for yourself. But I feel like we pick up on these concepts that we hear from, I don't know where we hear them from. I mean, they're all over the place. And we start to apply them to ourselves, and we give this strength and power to a concept that I don't think serves us very well. So as we're talking through this, I asked her, I said, so as I'm listening to you, do you mind if I share with you a possibility? One of my ideas as you're going through this. She said, yeah, absolutely. So I said, maybe you're not self-sabotaging yourself. Maybe you're making changes and your body is adjusting to those changes. And you're experiencing that as physiological symptoms and some mental and emotional issues. Okay, so let me just explain this a little bit. As you make changes, your body is usually going to resist. And that resistance manifests itself in the form of symptoms. Now, I liken it to a set point like a thermometer. Okay, so when you have your thermometer set to a certain temperature and the temperature changes outside of that, then the air kicks on to bring it back to that set point. And the body is very similar. It gets to a point to where it's very habituated to where it's at. Even if it's a suboptimal state, it's committed to this level of homeostasis. And any changes that you make to move it outside of that, it's going to resist to some degree. Now, as you're making these changes and your body's resisting and you're experiencing this resistance, you're also changing your set point, slowly but surely, with all the different tools that you're implementing. So as you make these changes, your body is communicating its resistance to you through some physiological symptoms. So let's just take nutrition as an example, okay? With nutrition, what are we using to try to change our set point? And by the way, set point could be synonymous with energy levels, body composition, some other symptoms or conditions you're working with, right? So if we look at nutrition, what are the tools that we're using to change our set point? We're using eating for nutrition, eating for nutritional value, emphasizing protein. We're moderating our carbohydrates and keeping them in smaller amounts from real food sources. And we're creating space in between meals. And for a lot of us, these things are very different from what we used to be doing. And so it kind of makes sense that because we're doing something very different from what our body's used to, and the body wants to resist, that it's going to communicate this resistance in the form of these physiological symptoms. And what are the physiological symptoms? I mean, for most of us, I think most of us can probably remember as we were beginning our real food journey. Remember that we're there right now. Low energy levels, just fatigue in general, feeling like you're in a funk. If it's really extreme, you can almost have like body aches and headaches. That's why they sometimes call it the low carb flu, even though we're not low carb, we're lower carb than what we were doing before. But what's really interesting is these physiological symptoms can also influence your mental and emotional state. I think all of us can acknowledge some periods of time where we were hangry, right? We had some low blood sugar moments, and we get into the state of being really aggravated and very sensitive, and we want to bite someone's head off until we get something to eat. And then we get something to eat, and all of a sudden all that changes. Well, that was a mental and emotional state that was influenced by your physiological symptoms that were influenced by some changes that you were making. So my point here is that consider the possibility that you're not fighting with yourself, or not fighting with this entity, or you're not holding yourself back at some kind of a weird unconscious level. And I'm not saying that that's not happening. I'm just saying consider this other possibility. Consider that you're giving too much power to this concept when really, maybe you're just attempting to change your physiology, which also manifests itself as physiological symptoms, which can also influence your mental and emotional state. Okay? So the reason that I bring that up is because we can start to bring in some self-compassion as we get to these junctures, these decision-making moments, as we do things that we're not happy with ourselves about. We can pause for a moment and just say to ourselves, I can expect this. This is going to happen, because if I'm making these changes to move my body out of a point that it is committed to, then it's going to resist to some degree. I'm going to experience that resistance as some physiological symptoms, but it's probably also going to influence my mental and emotional state, right? So this is a huge plug for some self-compassion. But then the question is, how do we work with this? Well, it feels like, we have two things to work with. We got our physiological state, and then we got the mental and emotional. So if we start with the physiological, and again, here I'm talking about nutrition, but you can probably translate this into the other lifestyle factors. If we're talking about nutrition, we want to make sure that we structure our meals, right? And most of us are at this point where we're emphasizing protein, and we have a nice little balance of some plant matter and animal foods and a little bit of carbs in moderation, and then we have space in between our meals. So, planning our meals is super crucial, but then also planning for those periods in between the meals, so that if we do have those moments of weakness or moments of low blood sugar and irritability and what we consider to be hangry, then if we're prepared, then we can head those things off before they start to really influence us, okay? That would kind of take care of the physiological piece. Now, the next would be to deal with the mental and emotional piece, all right? Now, just acknowledging that the physiological influences the mental and emotional, I think, is empowering for a lot of us, okay? And again, because you can bring in some self-compassion and not beat yourself up about you shouldn't be having these thoughts or feeling this way or having these urges or cravings or whatever they are, right? So to deal with that, I would say, first of all, this is why we meditate, is because we want to be present with the decision-making process. And this was something great that came out of this discussion this morning. What we want is, we're doing the best we can with the physiological piece. We're structuring things to the best of our abilities. And when we get to these moments to where we feel like we are at a juncture, at a decision-making moment, if we can catch it and be present with it and pause, then we have this ability to change the decision that we make, right? So the key is to be present with the thoughts that initiate the trigger for the decisions. And to do that, we want to just start the day with an intention that I want to be there, and I want to catch whatever that urge or craving or thought process is that leads to the decision that I think that I don't want to do, okay? So as an example, if we're trying to create some space in between lunch and dinner, we want to be present with the urge or craving to want to eat something. And as we are present with it, we can ask ourselves, hey, do I really need to eat something right now? And we all know when we need to, right? Like, you can't function. You're going to bite someone's head off. You're irritable. If you're in that mode, but you can sit there and be present with it, acknowledge it, then the answer is yeah, absolutely, have a little bit of something. That's when you want to have something that you have prepared beforehand, right? But we can take that to the cravings and urges for the things that we know that we don't want to do and that don't serve us. If we can be present with the thought that initiates the decision and give it just a little bit of space. Now that space could literally be, you hit a timer and say, I'm going to give it 5 minutes. Not yet. Or you could literally sit there and just have a conversation with yourself about what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Have a vision for yourself and how you want this day to finish, and how you know that you're going to feel when you get to bed making the right decisions, and how you know you're going to feel if you make the wrong decision, right? And I was telling my client this morning that if we have this intention to be present with the thoughts that initiate the decisions, then whether we make the right or wrong decision doesn't matter anywhere near as much as catching the thought in the first place, right? That's the most important piece of this, because if I can make a habit out of catching my thought and then pausing and being there and being present with it, then chances are that over time, that little pause is just enough power to give me to make a decision in a better direction. And guess what? When you make a decision in a better direction, then that begets more decisions in better directions, because you feel better from it and it gives you momentum. And you get better at this skill at noticing yourself, having the thoughts that lead to the decisions you don't want to make. And you get better at making the decision that's in the direction that you want to make the decision in. So I think those are the best two things that we can do. Work with the physiological by structuring things appropriately, being prepared for our weak moments, and then also having this intention to work with the mental and emotional piece by being present with our decisions, being present with our thoughts as they happen, and just be there with it. Celebrate in being there with the craving and the urge. And it doesn't matter whether you go for the thing or not. What matters is that you were there and you didn't just go right into making the decision without having some presence around it, and then also having some self-compassion, like understanding that when you make these physiological changes that lead to physiological symptoms, those physiological symptoms influence your mental and emotional state, then you don't have to beat yourself up so much about the reason that you're feeling the way that you are, or about the reason that you want to make the decision that you want to make, because they're being influenced by your physiology, okay? I want to finish with this last thing that we talked about, and that was, how what we're asking ourselves to do is very simple, and at the same time it's not, because of everything we're talking about right here. So it's simple in that if I just look at what I need to do for health, it is very simple. I need to get up early. I need to get some early morning light. I need to do a little bit of movement, whatever that is to me. I probably need to sit in some quiet time. And I need to eat real food and not eat all the time. And get to bed early. And do it again the next day, and the next day, and the next day. So in some ways, it's like unbelievably simple what we have to do, especially since we have the guidelines, we have the rules, we have the boundaries. But at the same time, it's not simple. Because as we just mentioned, as we're doing these things that are supposed to be very simple, we're changing our physiology, we're experiencing symptoms from it, those are influencing our mental and emotional state. We've got our years and decades of dysfunction, which are basically built up, addictions and habituations. And so it isn't simple. But if we can look at it as something simple, and we can visualize the simplicity of an ideal day, I feel like there's something good that comes out of it. It feels really good to see yourself going through the simplicity of what it is that we need to do to be healthy. And that helps reinforce the decisions that we're supposed to make. So where it gets derailed is right here. Every decision that we make in a wrong direction started as a thought. And so I guess I just want to summarize this whole thing with expect, first of all, structure your physiological things that you're trying to change to influence your physiology and change your set points in whatever direction those are. Structure those things appropriately, and then also have a little bit of a backup plan or some leeway or some flexibility or something along those lines. And then also understand that those things are going to influence your mental and emotional state. So give yourself some self-compassion, and then also be present with every decision that you make, because the more present you are, the more of a chance you have to make a decision in a better direction. And even if you don't, the fact that you are there is the most important thing. All right. Hope that wasn't too long. Hope I captured what it was that I wanted to say. Thank you for sticking around if you made it this far. All right. Y'all make it a great day.